"Just hurry and kill me," she whispered, until the cowboy saw her scars and promised revenge. The frontier sun was low on the horizon, casting long shadows over the cracked metal of the abandoned transit station. Dust swirled in the air, glowing orange as it caught the light. Out here, on the edge of human-controlled space, the world seemed empty, silent, and unforgiving. Few people came this far. Fewer still survived. Rylan Cade, a human marshal, rode slowly through the empty station. His boots kicked up dirt with every step, and the faint jingle of spurs echoed across the empty platforms. He had traveled hundreds of light years to patrol the old trade routes, keeping the fragile peace between scattered colonies. Humans had spread far across the stars, but the frontier was still dangerous. Not because of wars, not because of monsters, but because of loneliness and desperation. He was just about to leave when he noticed movement near the edge of the platform. A small figure lay curled on the ground. The figure was trembling, weak, and pale under the artificial lights of the station. Rylan dismounted slowly, his hand hovering over the old blaster at his hip, though he had no intention of using it. "Hey," he said in a calm voice, "are you okay?" The figure stirred. Her head lifted slightly, revealing a face pale and scarred. Her hair fell in uneven strands, dark against her pale skin. She opened her mouth to speak, and a whisper barely carried over the wind. "Just hurry and kill me." Rylan froze. The words were shocking, even in a universe where danger was common. He had heard cries for help before, but never a request to end life. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said slowly, kneeling at a safe distance. "Whatever happened to you, you don't deserve this." Her eyes, large, dark, and empty, did not register fear or anger. Only exhaustion, only pain, only surrender. She did not respond. She simply closed her eyes again, curling her body tighter, as if that small movement could make the world stop pressing down on her. Rylan studied her. She was not human. Her skin had a faint blue tint, and strange ridges ran along her arms. Her fingers were slightly longer than human hands, but delicate. Her species was unfamiliar to him. He had traveled the stars long enough to meet many races, but this one was new. What caught his attention most, however, were the scars, long, thin lines that ran along her arms, across her collarbone, down her neck. They were healed, but still fresh enough to sting the eyes. They did not look like battle wounds. They did not look accidental. They were deliberate. Rylan's voice softened. "Who did this to you?" The girl shook her head slightly, a faint, almost imperceptible movement. She did not answer. Rylan looked around. The station was abandoned. There was no one else here. He knew she had been left alone for a reason. She had not wandered here by accident. Someone had meant for her to die, or, at least, to be forgotten. He lowered himself to sit on the ground a few feet away. "Listen," he said gently. "I can help you. I can take you somewhere safe. I don't care what your past is. No one deserves to be left like this." She opened her eyes slightly. They were red-rimmed and watery, as if she had been crying for days. She looked at him, a flicker of surprise, or perhaps disbelief, passing over her face. I don't want to live," she whispered. Rylan shook his head slowly. "Then I guess we have a choice to make," he said softly. "You don't have to answer me now. You don't have to trust me yet. But I'm not leaving you here." She let out a small, bitter laugh. "You don't know. You don't understand. I know enough." Ryland said. I know what it feels like to be alone. I know what it feels like to be hurt. And I know humans. We don't leave people behind. The words hung in the air. They felt heavy, strange. In all her life, no one had ever said anything like that to her. She did not answer, but her body relaxed slightly, just enough to let him move closer. Ryland pulled out a small med kit from his bag. He knelt carefully and examined the scars. They were old, yes, but precise, made by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. The scars were almost ritualistic, a map of pain meant to erase hope. Who did this to you? He asked again. She flinched. The question, even spoken gently, hurt her. Finally she spoke, her voice barely more than a whisper. They call themselves the scholars. They study weakness. They break people. Then they erase them. Ryland's eyes narrowed. He had heard of the scholars. They were a dominant coalition of alien species who believed in control over others through mental domination. They had no armies, no blasters. They relied on manipulation, experiments, and fear. They were cruel in ways humans were not accustomed to, because they destroyed hope rather than life. And you survived, he said. I don't know why, she admitted. Every day I wanted just to stop, to end it. But they didn't give me a choice. Ryland took a deep breath. He looked at the horizon, where the sun had almost disappeared, leaving streaks of red and purple across the sky. Out here in the emptiness, no one would come to help them. It would be up to him. I'm not going to let them finish what they started, he said. Her eyes widened slightly. You can't, she whispered. They are too powerful.
You don't know what they can do. I know enough, Ryland said firmly.
I know what humans can do. We survive. We protect. We fight in ways that don't require killing. And I'm going to help you survive, too. She studied him carefully, as if trying to read his soul. For the first time, the fear in her eyes shifted slightly. She did not trust him yet, but she also did not resist. Ryland stood slowly and extended a hand. Come on, he said. We'll leave this place. You don't have to decide anything yet. Just come with me. Her hand hovered over his, trembling. Then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, she placed it in his. They moved carefully across the station, Ryland supporting her weight. Her steps were weak, unsteady, as if she had forgotten how to walk. The wind carried a faint, metallic scent, perhaps the remnants of old machinery, perhaps the residue of something else. As they reached the edge of the platform, Ryland looked back once. The sun had almost disappeared completely. Shadows stretched long across the ground, and the station looked lonelier than ever. You're not alone anymore, he said softly. Not while I'm here. She did not answer, but a single tear slid down her cheek. It was the first sign of emotion she had, so the ship hummed softly as it cut through the emptiness of space. Outside, stars stretched like silver threads across the black sky, endless and infinite. For the first time in what felt like forever, the girl, who had yet to tell Ryland her name, watched the stars without fear. They were a strange comfort, something alive and constant in a universe that had tried so hard to erase her. Ryland sat across from her, hands resting on the controls, glancing occasionally at her. He could see her scars even through the dim light of the cockpit. They were intricate, almost like a map of suffering, etched across her arms, shoulders, and neck. He had seen scars before, on soldiers, on explorers, but nothing like this. These were deliberate, designed to hurt not just the body but the spirit. "Do you want to tell me your name?" he asked quietly. She shook her head, eyes fixed on a distant star. "It doesn't matter," she whispered. "Names, they belong to people who survive. I don't know if I am one of them anymore." Rylan leaned back, studying her. "Survival isn't about what you think you deserve," he said. "It's about what you choose to do next. Right now you're surviving by being here, and that counts." Her eyes flicked toward him. She had never heard words like that before. Most people who had looked at her scars either looked away in disgust or curiosity. No one had ever acknowledged her choice to live. The smallest ember of hope flickered within her chest, but she quickly pushed it down. She had survived for so long by not hoping. Hope was dangerous. Hope could be taken. I don't know why you care," she said, her voice low and bitter. "I care because someone once cared for me," Rylan replied. "Someone believed I could do more than just survive. Humans, we don't forget that, and neither should you." She stayed silent after that, letting the words settle. For hours they did not speak. The hum of the ship, the soft blinking of the control panels, and the occasional pulse of the engine filled the space between them. It was comfortable. Something she had not felt in a long time. Quiet that did not come with fear. Finally she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "You don't understand what they did to me."
I want to understand, Rylan said gently. She turned toward him slowly.
Her dark eyes glimmered with something fragile, almost like trust. "The scholars, they are not like anything you know. They don't use guns. They don't fight with armies. They study the weak. They find what makes you small, what makes you feel alone. And they make it worse. Every day they reminded me that I didn't matter, that I was nothing, that I was not even a life worth saving." Rylan felt a tightness in his chest. He had encountered cruelty before, but never this methodical, this calculated. And yet, he saw something else too. Something he had learned to recognize in humans long ago. Strength. She had survived them. And surviving something designed to erase you was no small thing. "They wanted to erase me completely," she continued. "They marked me. Each scar is a memory, a reminder of every time I failed them. Every time I tried to fight back. Every time I almost gave up." Rylan nodded slowly. "Then you didn't fail. You're still here. You're still alive. And you're not alone anymore." She looked away, her fingers tracing one of the scars absent-mindedly. "I don't know how to be."
Alive like this? I'm
"Scared that it will hurt again, that it's not over, that even now I'm still nothing." Rylan leaned forward, his gaze steady. "That's the human part of it. Fear, pain, doubt. We all have them. But the difference is, we act anyway. We keep going. That's what makes us alive. That's what makes us human." The girl considered his words. They were simple, almost naive, but something about them resonated. No one had ever said anything like that to her. No one had ever explained life instead of taking it away. Hours passed as they traveled in silence. Occasionally, she would ask small, cautious questions about the human world, questions about the stars, about planets, about why he chose to patrol the frontier instead of settling somewhere safe. Rylan answered each one patiently, with no judgment, no condescension. "You're different," she said finally. "Most humans, they wouldn't stop. They would keep going, leave me behind, or worse, exploit me. But you help."
You. Listen. Listen.
"I've been in your place before," Rylan said quietly. "Not here, not in this galaxy, but in my past, and someone helped me. No one owed them anything. They just cared. That's the difference. That's what humans can do. We care, even when it seems pointless, even when it's hard." She didn't answer immediately. Her eyes lingered on his face, searching for deception, for judgment, for weakness, but she found none. Only honesty, only patience, only the quiet promise that he would not abandon her. Finally, she spoke. I want to tell you everything, but I'm afraid that once I speak it, it will be real, that the memories will take over again." Rylan nodded. "Then we take it slow, one story at a time, and you don't have to finish it all today." She looked at him, and for the first time, a small, genuine smile touched her lips. It was tentative, almost painful in its fragility, but it was there. I am called Lyra," she said finally. "Lyra Vey." Rylan smiled.
Lyra, that's a good name.
Lyra looked down at her hands. "Do you want to hear why the scars?" she asked softly. "I do," he said, "if you're ready." Lyra took a deep breath. "They didn't just want to hurt me. They wanted to break me, to teach me that I was nothing. Each scar, each line, was a lesson, a memory, a proof that I had failed. They forced me to relive my worst fears over and over. And if I cried, if I showed weakness, they punished me. If I ran, they punished me. If I stayed silent, they punished me. Every day was a trap. Every day I was trapped in their world of pain." Rylan listened silently, his heart heavy, but he did not flinch. He did not turn away. He did not judge. He simply let her speak, letting her unburden herself. That was enough for her. That alone was enough to plant a seed of hope. "I survived," she said finally, her voice shaking.
But barely. And now,
"Now I don't know what to do. I'm afraid that surviving isn't enough, that I will always be their property, their lesson, their proof that I am weak." Rylan reached out, placing a hand over hers. "Lyra, you are not their property. You are not their lesson. You are alive. You are more than what they made you believe. And I promise I will help you see that." Lyra's eyes filled with tears. I don't know if I can forgive myself, or even trust anyone again." "You don't have to trust anyone yet," Rylan said softly. "But you can start, one step at a time. Right now, the first step
Is just surviving. The second step.
is realizing that you are not alone anymore, that someone cares, that someone believes in you. And the third step, Well, we'll get there when the time comes. Lyra blinked at him, her heart pounding in a way it hadn't in years. For the first time, she felt a strange foreign sensation. Hope. It was small, fragile, and trembling, but it was there. The ship entered a small human outpost, a forgotten station at the edge of civilized space. Rylan guided it carefully toward a landing bay. Lyra watched the stars change as they slowed, the outpost growing larger through the viewport. She had never seen humans build anything like this. Warm lights, safe corridors, places to rest. This is human? She asked, awe in her voice. Rylan nodded. One of many. We build not just to survive, but to protect. Not just to exist, but to care. You'll see that for yourself. The ship touched down with a soft thrum. Rylan helped her out and led her inside. The outpost smelled faintly of food and metal. People moved through the corridors with purpose but no hurry, their voices calm, their eyes curious but not threatening. Lyra felt a strange sensation in her chest. Safety. Comfort. Something she had never felt outside the scholar's world. Rylan showed her to a small room with a bed. Rest, he said. Eat if you're hungry. Drink if you're thirsty. You've earned it. And tomorrow we start figuring out what comes next. Lyra sank onto the bed, exhausted but alive. She traced the edges of her scars again, feeling the sharp memories beneath them. But now, for the first time, she felt that maybe, just maybe, there could be a life beyond pain. A life where she was more than a lesson, more than a failure, more than the sum of her scars. Rylan left her room, quietly closing the door. He walked down the corridor, looking out at the stars beyond the station windows. Somewhere out there, the scholars continued their experiments, their cruel plans. But here, in this small corner of human space, a spark had been lit, and that spark was hope. The small outpost was quiet as Rylan stepped into the command center. Lights glowed softly against the metal walls, and screens flickered with messages from distant colonies and trade routes. Humans had built places like this across the galaxy, not as fortresses, but as hubs of knowledge, safety, and cooperation. Rylan ran a hand over the console, pulling up information about the scholars. They were known throughout many systems as manipulators, experts in psychological control, and masters of intimidation. They had no armies, no weapons that humans could see. Their power came from fear, secrecy, and the belief that no one would oppose them. But Rylan had learned something long ago. Fear could be challenged. Secrecy could be broken. And no matter how smart a coalition seemed, there was one thing they underestimated. Humans never gave up on those who mattered. He thought about Lyra, sitting alone in the small room they had given her. Her hands still trembled sometimes when she looked at her scars. Her eyes were still haunted by memories no one should have to face. And yet, she had survived. Against all odds, she had endured. Rylan's jaw tightened. They think they can erase hope, he muttered to himself. They have no idea what humans are capable of. He began searching the archives, cross-referencing information about the scholars' colonies, trade agreements, and known experiments. His fingers moved quickly over the interface, pulling records, letters, and old testimonies. He did not need weapons to fight them. He needed evidence, witnesses, and patience. Meanwhile, in her small room, Lyra sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall. She could hear the soft hum of the outpost beyond her door, and the distant voices of humans going about their business. For the first time in her life, she felt safe. She had survived cruelty for so long that being safe now seemed almost suspicious. She thought of Rylan and how he had treated her, not with fear, not with suspicion, not with the coldness the scholars had trained her to expect, but with patience. He had not demanded answers, had not punished her for silence, had not tried to control her. He had listened. He had protected. Maybe humans are different, she whispered to herself. Maybe not all species are cruel. The next morning, Rylan returned to her room. He carried a small datapad filled with reports, messages, and legal records. He sat beside her bed. "Lyra," he said gently.
We need to start planning. They think they are untouchable.
"But every empire falls when its secrets are revealed. That's what we're going to do." Lyra looked at him, confusion and fear mingling in her eyes. We can fight them? "Not with weapons," Rylan explained. "With facts, with witnesses, with the truth. Humans have survived countless oppressions by doing what the scholars cannot, standing for what is right, and never giving up. That's how we win." She shook her head. "I don't know if I can face them. Even if I am alive now, seeing them again, it would destroy me." "You won't be alone," Rylan said firmly. "I'll be there, and you have something they never had. Proof that they can be stopped. Your story is more powerful than any threat they could make." For hours they went through the datapads, piecing together a plan. Rylan contacted human allies across nearby systems, quietly gathering observers, recorders, and diplomats. The goal was not war. The goal was justice, exposure, and recovery. Every message, every report, every testimony would be documented. Lyra listened, sometimes silently, sometimes asking questions. She was hesitant, but each word from Rylan made her feel less like a victim and more like a person with power. "You understand," Rylan said, leaning closer, "that this will take time. The scholars will try to scare us. They will try to make us doubt ourselves. But they cannot erase the truth. And humans, we never give up." She nodded slowly. I
believe you. I want
to help," Rylan smiled. "Good. That's the first step. You can survive. Now you can fight in your own way, and I will be here, every step." They spent the next days preparing. Lyra shared fragments of her experiences, what she could remember without breaking herself. Rylan carefully recorded each story, anonymizing it where necessary, connecting it to evidence from other victims. Together, they built a picture of the scholars' cruel experiments, their manipulation, and their control. It was painstaking work. Lyra often grew tired, overwhelmed by memories she had long tried to bury. But Rylan never rushed her. He would sit quietly, offering water, small meals, and encouragement. "You're doing more than surviving," he said one evening. "You're teaching me, and everyone else who hears this, that hope is stronger than fear." Lyra looked at him, surprised. "You really mean that?" "I do," he said. "Humans have a saying, the measure of a person is not how they endure pain, but what they do with it. You are showing the galaxy that pain does not define you. That's something no one could take away." Her heart swelled with a strange pride. She had always been defined by scars, by suffering, by being less than. But here, for the first time, she felt seen for her strength, not her weakness. One night, as the stars moved past the station windows, Lyra asked softly, "Rylan, if we do this, if we expose them, will it be enough?" Ryland paused, looking out at the black sky dotted with silver lights. "It won't be easy," he said. "They've survived fear and secrecy for centuries. But humans, we have patience, determination, and the will to protect those who cannot protect themselves. And we never forget." Lyra thought of the scholars, of the fear they had instilled in her, of the endless nights spent imagining there was no escape. And yet, here she was, planning their downfall, not with weapons, not with violence, but with truth, courage, and persistence. "We can do it," she said finally. Rylan nodded.
Yes.
"And when the time comes, you will see something incredible. Even the strongest empire can crumble when the truth stands in its way." The next morning, Rylan took Lyra to a secure communications hub. "This is where we start," he explained. "We'll reach out to witnesses from other systems, those who have suffered under the scholars. We'll give them a voice. And when we are ready, the galaxy will see what they have done." Lyra watched the screens as Rylan activated connections across nearby sectors. Messages pinged in from survivors, from merchants, from scholars who had left the coalition, and from travelers who had observed strange experiments. Each account added weight to their growing case.
"It's amazing," Lyra said. "So many people,
They felt the same as me.
Rylan smiled. Yes.
And now we can make sure no one suffers in silence ever again. That's the difference humans make. We don't just survive. We stand for others. We fight for justice without killing. That's our strength." Days turned into weeks as they built the network, gathered evidence, and prepared for the first broadcast. Lyra grew stronger. Her voice, once trembling, became firm as she told her story for the first time to a trusted recorder. She spoke of fear, of pain, of the scars etched into her body, and of the small ember of hope Rylan had helped ignite. The cowboy watched her carefully. She was no longer the frightened girl who had whispered for death on an abandoned station. She was a survivor, a storyteller, a force that could challenge the scholars' lies. "You're ready," Rylan said quietly. "Tomorrow, the galaxy will see the truth, and they cannot ignore it." Lyra looked at him, a mixture of fear and determination in her eyes. "And you will stay with me?" "Always," he said. "You are not alone anymore. Not then, not now, not ever." That night, as the outpost slept, Lyra traced her scars once more. They were still there, reminders of the past she had endured. But now, they were no longer chains. They were proof of survival, testaments to endurance, and symbols of the change she was about to bring. Rylan checked the final records one last time. The scholars thought themselves untouchable. They believed silence protected them. But humans, patient, clever, and relentless humans, had already begun turning the tide. No gun, no violence, no rage was needed. Only truth, only persistence, only the promise that the galaxy would know. And in that quiet moment, high above forgotten systems, Rylan Cade made a silent vow. He would see this through. For Lyra, for humanity, for justice, because humans, he knew, never gave up. And sometimes that was more powerful than any weapon in the stars. The hum of the outpost was alive with activity. Screens glowed in soft blues and greens, displaying the names and faces of countless systems across human space and beyond. Rylan and Lyra worked side by side, preparing the final transmission. For weeks, they had gathered stories from survivors, trade reports, secret testimonies, and old evidence of the scholars' cruelty. Now it was time for the galaxy to see the truth. Lyra sat quietly in front of one of the main consoles, her fingers hovering over the controls. Her hands were steady now, though her heart raced. She glanced at Rylan. "Are you sure this will work?" she asked softly. Rylan smiled, calm and confident. "It has to. The scholars believe fear protects them. But humans?
We don't need weapons to break fear. We need truth."
And now the galaxy will see the truth. For the first time in her life, Lyra felt a spark of hope that was not fragile. This was not just survival. This was action. This was power. Rylan keyed the final sequence. A soft hum went through the room as the transmission began. Screens across neighboring systems flickered to life, showing testimonies from Lyra and other survivors. Their voices were steady, clear, and filled with emotion. They told their stories of fear, pain, and endurance, revealing the hidden cruelty of the scholars. Lyra's own voice came through first. She told the story of her scars, the experiments, the endless days of psychological torment. She spoke of fear and hopelessness, but also of the small ember of courage Rylan had helped ignite. As the broadcast reached more systems, the reactions began immediately. Across human colonies and neutral territories, citizens watched, listened, and shared. Merchants, travelers, and diplomats sent messages of support. Others who had suffered quietly under the scholars' influence came forward, their voices adding weight to the growing chorus. The scholars' leaders, for the first time in centuries, felt the sting of scrutiny. They had believed secrecy would shield them. They had believed silence was their armor. But humans had shown them that the most powerful force in the galaxy was not a weapon or army. It was accountability. "They can't just erase this," Lyra whispered to Rylan as she watched the reactions roll in. "They can't punish all of these people." "No," Rylan said. "And even if they try, humans, and anyone who values justice, will not stay silent." That's what they never understood. Truth is stronger than fear. And patience is stronger than cruelty. Across multiple star systems, trade partners of the scholars began withdrawing. Agreements once thought solid were now questioned. Diplomatic messages poured in, demanding answers. Lyra watched in awe as the tide began to turn. She had spent her life believing she was powerless, that her suffering meant nothing. But now her story was sparking change. Hours passed, and Lyra began to understand something she had never known. Her voice mattered. Every detail she had feared sharing, every scar, every memory, was proof that the scholar's cruelty could not go unchecked. And every human and alien who spoke out added strength to the movement. Rylan guided her through each step. "Don't let fear control you," he said. "You're not just telling your story. You're showing the galaxy that hope survives, that cruelty can be confronted, and that no one is truly powerless." Lyra nodded. She found herself repeating the phrase in her mind. Hope survives. It was no longer fragile. It was growing. As the days passed, the scholars attempted to respond. They sent messages of denial, claiming all allegations were false, that the stories were exaggerated, that no one had truly suffered. But the humans had prepared for this. Every claim was met with corroborating testimony, documents, and evidence from multiple sources. The scholars could no longer hide. Their empire, built on fear and secrecy, was unraveling. Systems that had once bowed to their authority began to question them openly. News of the broadcast spread faster than any ship could travel. Lyra watched, feeling an unfamiliar mixture of fear and exhilaration. The same people who had once made her feel small and powerless were now on trial before the eyes of the galaxy. not through force, but through truth and persistence. Ryland stood behind her, quietly observing. "Do you see?" he asked. They thought silence would protect them. But humans, we remember. We document, we expose, and we don't stop until justice is done. For the first time, Lyra felt pride, not just in herself, but in humanity. She realized that humans were more than explorers, more than settlers, more than fighters. They were guardians of hope and justice, capable of changing the galaxy not with weapons, but with courage and persistence. Messages of support continued to pour in. Survivors shared more details, some for the first time, now emboldened by the human example. Traders and diplomats threatened to cut all ties with the scholars until they admitted wrongdoing. Entire star systems joined a chorus, demanding accountability. Lyra felt a strange lightness in her chest. For the first time, she was not defined by her scars or her past suffering. She was defined by her courage, her survival, and her voice. "You see," Ryland said gently, "you've done more than survive, Lyra. You've sparked change. That's what humans do. We take hope, no matter how small, and we make it unstoppable." Tears filled her eyes, but this time they were not of fear or pain. They were tears of release, of recognition, of empowerment. She had spent her life believing she was powerless, a victim of cruelty that no one could challenge. But now she had become part of something bigger than herself, a force for justice across the stars. The scholars tried to respond again, sending threats and warnings. But the galaxy no longer feared them. The truth had taken root, and humans and allies stood ready to ensure that no one could ignore it. Ryland watched the reactions on the main console. Entire networks of communication were alive with discussion, debate, and action. Systems were forming councils to protect survivors. Trade partners were reconsidering agreements. News of the scholars' exposure spread like wildfire. Lyra smiled, small but genuine. We did this? We started it," Ryland said. "But it's not just us. It's everyone who refused to stay silent. You've given them courage. And that courage will not be forgotten." For the first time in her life, Lyra felt a sense of belonging. She was no longer the girl who had whispered for death on a forgotten station. She was part of a movement, a network, a galaxy that could see truth, act on it, and protect those who could not protect themselves. Night fell over the outpost, the stars outside shining brighter than ever. Lyra sat beside the viewport, tracing the constellation she had never known, feeling for the first time that she was free. Free from fear. Free from silence, free from the belief that she had no power. Ryland approached quietly, standing beside her. "Tomorrow, the next phase begins," he said. "The scholars will try to regain control. Buy. But we will be ready. Every system, every survivor, every witness. They are our strength. And you are the heart of it all." Lyra looked at him, her eyes steady and determined. "Then we keep going," she said. "We don't stop until everyone knows the truth." "Exactly," Ryland said. "Humans never stop, not when hope is on the line, not when justice is at stake. Not when someone needs protection. That's why we exist. That's why we travel the stars. And that's why the galaxy will see that cruelty can never win." Lyra nodded, feeling the weight of her past lift slightly with each word. She traced her scars once more, but now they felt different. Not chains, not marks of failure, but testaments to endurance, courage, and survival. The galaxy was watching. The scholars could no longer hide, and Lyra, with Rylan by her side, was ready to show the universe that hope survives, even against cruelty designed to destroy it. The first wave of change had begun, and for the first time, Lyra believed that the future could be brighter than the past. In a long time, perhaps ever. They reached his ship, a rugged, human-built transport craft patched in places with extra plates and reinforcement. It looked small, but it had carried him across hundreds of systems, and it would carry them again. As she settled into the seat, Ryland started the engines. The low hum filled the cockpit, a familiar, comforting sound. She watched the station disappear behind them as they lifted off. For the first time, she felt the small, tentative spark of something she had almost forgotten. Hope. Ryland glanced at her. "You don't have to tell me everything now. Just survive with me today. That's enough for now." She nodded slightly, her eyes fixed on the stars outside the window. They stretched endlessly, vast and infinite, full of possibilities she had never imagined for herself. And for the first time she allowed herself a thought that had seemed impossible only hours ago. Maybe she didn't want to die after all. The stars were moving fast now, carrying them toward the unknown. And somewhere, out there in the galaxy, justice awaited, not through weapons, but through human persistence, patience, and care. Ryland did not speak for a long time. He let her rest, let her recover, but he made a silent promise as he navigated the ship through the void. He would not let the scholars win. He would not let her story end in darkness. He would see her through this. For her and for humanity, the journey had just begun.